Here is the wall I'm going to be painting on, and I'm going to be working from left to right. When you're doing this transition wall, you do need to start and move in one direction. So I'm going left to right. You can go right to left. And I'm doing karate chopping there for some reason, probably talking about the logo. I have the big circle in the middle where we had painted our logo, and so you will just obviously not have that there. I'm just going to work around it as I paint. Before you actually start painting, you want to measure your wall. I'm working in a 14-foot space. I'm only painting 12 feet of it in this video. So I measured the middle, which was 6 feet down the middle. And I think I was working with 4 main colors. I have 5 colors, but 4 of them were sort of main blocks. And so you would just kind of divide it. It just gives you a rough idea of what color you should be at by the time you reach the middle of the wall. And that just sort of helps visualize like when you want to start making those transitions. So if your wall is a different size, you just want to kind of divide it out in fourths or however many colors you plan to work with. I'm starting with the brightest color pink, and I am cutting in the edge of the door. I don't use painter's tape because I paint all the time and I'm too lazy to tape it. So I just use the edge and edge it in. You want to cut your edge in. If it's the corner of the wall or whatever it is, you want to cut that in first. And then you're also going to want to cut the ceiling in. It's just going to lay kind of the framework of where you're working from. And then when you start brushing down and brushing other colors in, you don't have to worry about that top edge that's hitting your ceiling. I painted right over the light switch because I wanted it to be invisible against the walls. So, they're like 79 cents. So, you can just go right over the top. I don't know why I didn't do the outlet, but I didn't do the outlet. Now I am going to start adding in my next color, which is actually, I use it more of an accent color. This is one of the main blocks, and it's peach. I think it's Mermaid Cheeks is the name of it by Valspar. When you're adding paint to your brush, you don't want to load it super heavy. You want to make sure you're kind of just getting the edges of the bristles. You never want to go past sort of that halfway mark, which you can kind of see on my paintbrush there. You are just going to kind of start adding your first color, and then as you start adding more colors, you really just want to use a little bit of paint. A little bit goes a long way. If you get it too loaded with paint, it can start to kind of create problems in the way that it blends out, so you can always add later. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little bit of the peach and start to feather it in. I generally would keep my brush in a somewhat vertical direction when I'm adding these secondary colors and doing sort of a sweeping brushing motion. So I'll add peach to the wall, and then I will go back and I'll blend more pink into it. So really you're just using one brush, you're layering right over the top of the other color. You're going to go right back over it, and you can see how it kind of blends nicely together there. At the beginning, we want to create a little bit more of a blended look with the colors, and then later on, we're going to feather a little bit more with some dry brushing to give it a bit of texture. But here, we're just sort of layering the paint on and creating a really nice, pretty transition. You don't want to overwork the paint because then you sort of lose the sort of effect that you're going to get on the wall. So just don't blend it too much. And if you do, you can always let it dry a little bit and then go back over it. You do have to be careful not to put too much paint onto the wall because it can start to get goopy. So if you're feeling like that's happening, just let that part of the wall dry and then come back to it a little bit later after you've kind of moved down. This paint technique, it will dry pretty quickly. So it's not like a very long time. You don't have to wait like an hour just until it's not super tacky. Now I'm going to start adding a little bit of the lilac color, and because I use this as a transitional color, I really am going to blend it a lot into the pink, and then as it moves over, we're going to add another color in, and this one is just going to really be a color to blend between the two. So I'm kind of dipping between the 3 different colors right now, going back and adding some peach accents, and then I will start laying down a little bit more of that lilac paint here. The key to this technique is to really sort of feather the colors into each other, and it's sort of a balance of blending them together without over blending them, just so that you get this sort of nice textured kind of feel. And so if you're putting the paint down and you feel like you have sort of too much of one color, then like here we can go back in and just throw a little bit of pink paint kind of over the top, and just sort of blend it out slightly. Right here, we're just kind of working between the 3 different colors, and I will go from one to the next, and I'm always kind of walking backwards as I'm moving forward. That kind of, as you walk backwards, you're sort of bringing some of those transition colors back to the beginning of the wall, which really helps give the whole thing kind of a cohesive look when you're finished. Once again, I am going in now with my lilac. I am doing the ceiling, so you want to make sure as you transition into your new colors that you cut the ceiling in. So you're going to go horizontal, and then you want to start dragging that paint downwards so that you don't have horizontal streaks. But you definitely want to cut the ceiling in first, because then you don't have to, again, worry about that edge, and you can kind of work that part of it without kind of getting hung up on that ceiling there. One of the things I do when I am laying the paint down is I will rotate my bristles so they're either vertical and then they're horizontal, and they're vertical and they're horizontal. I'm always painting in an up and down motion, but the paintbrush itself I'll kind of flip on its side and flip it upright. This just kind of helps change the width of the sort of streaking, and it kind of gives it a little bit more variation so it doesn't all end up looking exactly the same, and you get a little bit more of a organic kind of feel to the way the blending comes together. Here you can see how I am taking the peach again. I'm going back to the beginning of the wall, adding a little bit of it in. I'm blending it in with some of the lilac and just putting it down in just kind of small little sections. Again, this just kind of helps to make sure the beginning of the wall doesn't just become totally solid pink, and it just helps walk back some of that color. When I go to add my lavender, it's a little bit darker, so I'm going to start further right, and I'm going to leave a gap there, so that way I can kind of blend the lilac into the lavender. So I'm still kind of working left to right, but I'm also going to add that lavender and work that right to left. That way I don't have anything that's super dark, or I don't have a real stark transition. It helps kind of keep that nice soft blending in between them. And I am going to take some of the lavender and bring it back over into the pink area there. So again, just kind of having a little bit on the brush and sort of kind of dry brushing it into some of those areas, just to sort of, again, bring that color back to the other side of the wall. Okay, so I'm just going to show a little bit closer here when you're doing the overlapping colors. So again, I'm going to take my base, which is the lilac, and I'm going to dip it in the lavender so that they're right over the top of each other. And then I'm just going to paint those two together. And so when they're layered like that, they just blend as they paint. And then I'll add a little more lilac. That's going to give you a little bit more of that blended look. You want to have more of like a streak. Say I put that down right there. You do them one at a time. So it's going to give you more. It's going to give you a more streaked feel. Or if I kind of come back in here, so now I have all these colors, and I'm just going to kind of squish the brush down, and then just really fast strokes to kind of blend it in like that. So that's kind of how we're taking this color and bringing it back around, as we're kind of pulling these colors to the back. So then again, I'm going to put some lavender down, go over that a little bit, and then I'm going to bring the lilac in, and then that, and then just kind of blend them together, because that's kind of where that transition's happening. And then we'll start adding blue, so we can do that and bring that back in. So I'll show you that next. Okay, so I'm just going to show up close how you blend the paint together so you can see what I'm doing exactly. So I'm going to start transitioning into blue. So I'm just going to take blue, put it down here. So I can either put the blue down first and then put the lilac right over the top, or the lavender right over the top. Put them together like that. Get a little bit more blue that way. Otherwise, another way to do it, when I'm doing this, I use all of these techniques. It just depends on how I want that specific area to go together. So do that, and then add that. Just maybe follow me. And I'm actually going to come back in with a little bit more purple. See, when the paint is wet and fresh out of the can, it's going to blend a lot easier. The second it starts to dry, which is pretty fast, you'll lose that that really easy blendability like this. So just kind of transitioning into the blue through here. I want to kind of still make sure I have these other colors in the bottom. So I'm even going to still go back and grab lilac and pull it up into here. Just adds like that little subtle variation in the color here. That. And again, like I said, you don't want to work it too much or it starts to streak. So you have to let it dry a little bit. Work fast and then go back. So unfortunately, the last part of the video did not take, so the aqua, you can't see me adding the aqua, but the last step here is to really make sure that you go back and you bring just little hints of the blue and the aqua back to the left side of the wall. The other thing I also did is I grabbed little tiny streaks of peach and pink and moved it all the way to the right side of the wall. And I would recommend using kind of a dry brush technique. So you use very little paint and then you just swiftly sort of brush in those little spots because you don't want them to be super stark. You want them to be very subtle, which when you kind of pull back and look at the wall and you see both sides, you can kind of see that very subtle variation where you've added the different color paints on either side. This is Gigi, and this is Cupcake. Hello, Cupcake, how are you today?